Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, feel welcomed on this channel. My name is Duncan in real life, but on this platform, I call myself Captain Dra because I am leading an army of smart people. So I am presuming by the fact that you have just joined us, you are definitely one of those people who I consider smart, and you consider yourself smart as well. Why smart? Smart just because we believe we are smart people and we know better, and we are not ashamed to have conversations at a deeper level, and we are also exhausted with just shallow end conversations, and we are looking for people who have a thirsty mind, people who put their brains to work, and people who are looking forward to having a tribe. Now, this is a journey that I started less than a year ago, and I'm very proud for the far that we have come. Definitely, it is nothing compared to what I'm dreaming about. It is not yet where I want to take this tribe. But you know what? The journey of 1,000 steps begins with one step. And so far, I think I have made several steps. And if you're joining us for the first time, please just know that you're in the right place. I have been away for a month or two, and I'm sure some of you are asking, now, this guy, where did he disappear to? You have come and then you give us some good content. Good because people told me so. Good also because I believe so. And good because I could see the progress and the growth of my channel within the period that I was active, that there is enough number of people appreciating what I'm doing. So I am sure you guys have been wondering, where has this guy been? I am here to tell you a lot happens in life, and one thing you have to do is to embrace. You just embrace the moment and work around it and make sure that you don't lose sight of the focus and the goal. So my goal is to grow this channel to a place where we can have a big number of people sharing knowledge and a big number of people leveraging on whatever it is that other people know, to become better and to make wiser decisions and to educate the others and to inform the rest of the masses. So I have not lost sight of my goal, and I hope you guys who have been following me through it all have also not lost sight of the goal. My goal is to leverage on public information. I don't buy information, I just take advantage of what is already available in the internet, in books, in institutions, and I try to get the best out of that, and then I put it up together in a way in which majority of the public can understand. I hope I've been doing a good job so far, and if I've not, just know that I'm sharpening my skills, and we will even get better with time. So what are the specific topics that I talk about? I am someone who has an interest in just about everything. I would love to just know anything new, or anything that is any piece of information that will tickle my mind. I have a very hungry mind, and therefore I never want to limit myself when it comes to knowledge. But also I recognize that I have a background in specific fields, and in this case, accounting. I have a background in finance, I have a background in economics, and therefore my kind of conversations will normally be moved, or it will be inclined towards that direction. That doesn't mean that I am not open to other conversations, and therefore if you are hearing me and you're listening to me, please propose some of the specific topics that you've ever wanted to know more about. I can do the research for you, and then I come and educate the public. My dream is that one day I'll build a platform where everything that I'm talking about will not only be public information, but it will also be available to all of you in the cheapest way possible, so that I impact you and impact myself as well. Having said that, remember that these social platforms, how they operate, we win when we build followers. And therefore, I will not assume that element of these social platforms for you to become a movement, for you to have impact, for you to even have a bigger reach, you definitely have to build a tribe. And the only request you make to the tribe is that the tribe subscribes to your channel. I'm therefore asking you guys, if you're listening to me, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel. I promise you that you will not regret. The kind of topics we have here are things that probably on a normal day you might not find someone else talking about them because they sound complex sometimes, but I'm here to break them down to you. So to start us off, there is a lot of conversation that has been happening in the country of Kenya since the last time we talked. The current presidency or the current regime has already given us a new budget for the year 2024-2025. They went ahead and came up with a finance bill. They went ahead also and tried to pass the finance bill. Then the finance bill was rejected. Then after the rejection, there was a reorganization of the cabinet. And there is now a new set of cabinet secretaries who are tasked with leading the respective government agencies towards achieving whatever it is that the current regime set out to achieve. I want to be very clear that on our channel, we don't really talk much about politics because politics has a side to it that you cannot prove. It is not factual. Politics is very much a subjective kind of topic. There's a lot of the opinions we air out on politics is very subjective. And therefore, I never like to, while I am open to having the conversation, like I've always said, I don't have a problem having any type of conversation. But when it comes to politics, I recognize the fact that we can all have our respective opinions, and there is no one way to prove that one person is right and the other one is wrong. The only thing you can discuss when it comes to politics is strategy. The political strategies being applied by the respective politicians. But you cannot make a conclusion that you are right and the other person is wrong. There is no definite outcome whenever you're having political discussions. But when it comes to strategy, there is a place where both people who are having such a conversation can come to a conclusion and either agree or disagree very respectfully. But in our channel, we try to stick to things that are debatable from a factual perspective, from an informed perspective, and that is why I will tackle in the next few weeks, I'm going to tackle the issues of the budget. I'm going to tackle the issues of the finance bill, the new approach or the broad-based government as the current regime is calling it. I know some of these topics, they are now stale. We are now past the finance bill season. We are now past the demonstrations. And someone will ask me, why are you having these conversations now? You should have had these conversations when people were actually fighting, when these conversations were hot topics. And I'll tell you this, from where I sit, I am here to just educate. My goal is not to trend. If we trend, well and good. If we don't trend, also fine. What we are trying to do, we are trying to find a group of people who find this information impactful and important, not only for this season, but for the next season as well. So we are not here for trending purposes. If we decide to only have these conversations when the country is heated up, we might lose some very important elements. And that is why I still believe there is no right time to have these conversations. Whether the season is up or not, let's have these conversations. So straight to the point. So let's just do a small review of the budget that our president read a few months ago. So one thing you have to recognize is, why do we do budgets? Why is it critical and important for a government to do budgets? Some people just talk about the budgets, but you really don't know how important these budgets are Why are they so critical? The moment a political party wins an election and they come into power, we are assuming that during the campaign they used something called a manifesto. So a manifesto is an outline of what you intend to achieve and how you intend to change your community or your country. So you outline all the specific areas you're going to tackle, you outline all the specific ministries or the agenda, basically the agenda that you're going to ride on for you to be able to achieve or to change your country and to improve your country. You need to come up with a budget, because remember, an agenda is the specific activities that you intend to do. You come up with specific changes that you are going to carry out. But remember, those changes cannot happen until you have specific activities under those specific agendas. So for example, you want to take Kenya to become a high middle income country. So what does it take for you to get there? Then once you do that, you ask yourself, what are those specific activities? Now, those specific activities that you have to do, or maybe let me use an example that is more relatable. So you want 80% of the households in Kenya to be connected to electricity. That is one of your agendas. Now, to do that, you have to ask yourself, what will it take for me to do that? Then you come up with the specific activities that you have to carry out. Now, remember, those specific activities that you intend to carry out, they cannot be done without money. For you to know the damages, the actual money that you will need to carry out those activities, you must come up with a budget. Yeah. And that's why every government has to come up with a budget, and the budget will inform how they have allocated those resources, whether they are consistent with their agenda. You can already tell a government that is not honest by how they have allocated their budgets against their manifesto. So if someone's main agenda or campaign agenda was education, and then you go to the budget and then you find that they have allocated they have even reduced the budget on education from the previous regime, then you start telling yourself something is not right, that they were not honest, or they have changed their approach in the middle somewhere in there. But we have to figure out where. The budget is a very critical tool when it comes to national governance or any form of governance, because it informs you how you're going to allocate your resources, so that allocation of those resources can guide you on how you're going to achieve your agenda. Because if you don't allocate those resources well, if you don't move the right amount of money in the right places, then consistent with your agenda, then you might not achieve what you're planning out to achieve. And the importance of also coming up with that budget is so that you can ask yourself, this budget which I think is good enough for my agenda, do I have the money for it? Because that is the next automatic and immediate question you ask yourself. Do I have the money for it? Because coming up with a budget, especially an expenditure budget like the one we come up with in Kenya, coming up with a budget is the easier part. The harder part is, how do I have the money? And if you don't have the money, where do you get the money so that you can completely 100% fund your budget? Now, we shall come to that later. We shall come to the discussions on finance bills, on financing a budget. For today, I just want us to review the Kenyan budget for 2023-2024, of course, by also looking back at the previous budgets. Yeah. So for those people who have not found time to go deeper into the Kenyan budget, Kenya is a developing nation, and therefore there are some things that you might notice in the Kenyan budget that in other countries you might not notice, or in a middle income country you might not see, or in a higher income countries you might not see. Let me outline to you how the Kenyan budget looks like. So if the Kenyan budget, assuming it is 100%, in the last 4-5 years, the Kenyan government has been spending 41% of its budget into something called ministerial recurrent expenditure. In order for the government to just run its ministries, running ministries means paying staff, paying for administrative expenses, just making sure that those government offices are operational. 41% of the budget goes there. You guys can tell me whether you think some of these things make sense. Yeah, think about this from your own perspective, as an individual in your house. If you make 100% of your income, and then 40% of it goes to things like rent, goes to things like buying food, goes to things like paying for your laundry, paying for your security and all that. 41% of that goes. To make it easier, if you're making 100,000, so 40,000 has already gone into rent, it has already gone into food, it has already gone into security, internet, all those kind of things. Does that sound to you like something that you are okay with, you could be okay with? Now, number 2, we have something called interest payments and pensions. Interest payments, this is basically the amount of money that the Kenyan government has borrowed in previously, and now they are paying back that money. But because they borrowed money that has attracted that has interest, they have to repay the interest element. And the interest element of whatever the Kenyan government has borrowed forms 30% of its budget. Again, think about it. If you're making 100,000, 30,000 of what you're making is going to pay interest, not even the actual loan. 30,000 is paying it. So you've already paid 41,000 into the operations of your daily operations in your house and whatever and all that. Then you remain with 59. But from that 59, take away 30 so that you remain with 29. 30 just to go and pay interest on loans. That is what the Kenyan government is facing. So if you take 41 plus 30, that is already 71. So it means you remain with 29% of your income. And from this 29% of its income, or in this case, its expenditure, so let's talk about the expenditure, 19% goes to something we call ministerial development and expenditure. This is now what we call development budget. So development budget, this is how much they are spending on now improving things like infrastructure, technology, education. Only 19% of that budget is going into development. Yeah. And then we have another 10% that goes into now allocation into the county. You know, we operate a system that is devolved. So there's a percentage of our budget that goes into the county governments, which are 47. So just to give you a glimpse of now how the Kenyan budget looks like. I don't know about the rest, we shall find out. But for the Kenyan government, 41% of it goes into ministerial recurrent expenditure, just to operate ministries. 30% goes into paying interest on debt and, of course, pensions. And then we have 19% which goes into development. And then we have 10% which goes into counties. Guys, if you look at that figure, how does it make you feel? Please let me know in the comment section. The kind of allocation I've just mentioned to you is the overall allocation in terms of the categories, how the budget is categorized. But now, to know the specific economic thematic areas, yeah, which specific areas are this amount of money allocated to drive the agenda of that government. So you can tell the theme of a government, or you can tell what a government is trying to do by the specific area of the economy that they have allocated majority of its resources. So the question is, where or which specific area in Kenya is allocated more resources and why? The why we shall answer later. For today, let's just know which specific thematic areas. So out of the budget that we have, the Kenyan government allocates 1% to supporting manufacturing for job creation. 18% goes to enhancing national security. To be honest, guys, if you are to ask me my personal opinion, I know the world over, every country spends a lot of money on security. it's a known thing that across the world, countries spend a lot of money on security. But it's definitely because to protect themselves in the event that there is a need for that, because the world is very cagey. We operate in a system that we are led by people who, some are very war hungry, and some people are very egoistic, and they have been thirsting for war, and they thirst for battles. You can never know as a country when you will be attacked, or when the world will get into a war zone. And therefore, as a country, you just want to know that you are not very far off from the rest of the world. So you will notice that when you go to most of these countries' budgets, you will see a lot of allocation going into security. But considering that for the most part, all these years, most countries haven't really gone into war, sometimes I get bothered so much by the amount of money that is being spent on security. I'm not saying security is not important or critical. I'm just saying that I wish there was a different way in which we could approach this budgetary item called security. So the Kenyan budget, 18% goes into security, and then we have 19% going into investing in critical infrastructure, and then we have 31% going into enhancing access to quality education. So education in Kenya consumes the largest amount of our budget allocation. And for me, I think you can even tell by the literacy levels in the country. Yeah, you can tell by the literacy levels in the country, and therefore I wouldn't actually have a problem with allocating more resources to education, because education has proven to be the equalizer. Yeah, I personally can attest to that because I have experienced how education transforms lives. And you can tell by the quality of professionals and the quality of skilled labor that is churned out from a country like Kenya because of having high standards of education. Now, compared to the rest of the world, the first world countries, of course, we are still not anywhere close. But with what we have, with where we are, I think we are doing well. And allocation of 31% of our budget to education, which I think is the largest allocation into the budget, tells you exactly where Kenya as a country focuses more. Now, I don't know whether that is enough. You guys will tell me, but the conversations, of course, are going on. And then we have 5% going into environmental protection, water and natural resources. We have 4% going into equity, poverty reduction, women and youth empowerment. We have 1% going into social protection and affirmative action. And then we have 1% going into stimulating tourism, growth, and sports. And then finally, we have 19% equitable share to county governments. So from what I'm seeing here, you can already tell that our core areas, in terms of our thematic areas in our budget, a lot of money is going into education, a lot of money is going into infrastructure, a lot of money is going into security. Are those the specific areas that will take Kenya to the next level? Do you believe that allocation of more resources into those specific areas is the critical element that we need for us to move to the next level? Is that the kind of mix or a resource mix that takes countries from where they are, a third world country, to a middle income country, or even to a first world country? I know this is a very high level kind of discussion. I'm sure some people are already wondering, what are you talking about? That's a very high level conversation. Yes, it's a high level conversation because you have to start somewhere. We cannot dive deep from the start. We start somewhere, and these conversations keep going until we arrive at a place where we are understanding everything. So for those people who are joining us for the first time, that is what we are talking about: budgetary allocations in Kenya. And I've already told you that in terms of where we are spending our money, if you ever want to understand where majority of the problems in developing countries come from, then you can already understand where it comes from just by the allocation of the expenditure. So that is how our budget is allocated as at present. This is as per the budget that was read by the President William Ruto this year. And the question is, where does now he finance this budget from? financing of budgets, once you read a budget, you now figure out where that money is going to come from. If you read a budget of like 3.9 trillion, like he did, you have to ask yourself, do I have the 3.9 trillion as a country? Do you think Kenya has 3.9 trillion as a country to finance that budget? From what we have in our documents, the Kenya Revenue Authority, which is the agency that collects taxes, it is budgeted that they will only be able to provide 3.3 trillion. That means that the Kenyan government will find itself in a situation where almost 600 billion is not available to finance its budget. And the question is, where will that money now come from? Because if you don't finance your budget with that money, if you have budgeted 3.9 and you don't finance it fully, you will not achieve the kind of outcome you intended to achieve. That is normally the risk of not financing your budget fully, because part of achieving goals is allocating resources adequately. And inadequate allocation of resources normally will affect the outcome because it results into poor execution. So if you have 3.9, a budget of 3.9, you have to make sure that you get the 3.9 trillion. And as it is right now, the Kenya Revenue Authority can only give 3.3. And where is this 3.3 supposed to be coming from? The 3.3 is supposed to be coming from income tax. And guys, I don't want you to worry. One day, not soon enough, I'm going to talk to you about the income taxes, the value-added taxes, all the type of taxes that the government of Kenya collects. So the major revenue earner for the government is income tax. Income tax is the taxes on the money that businesses and individuals make. So for whatever income that comes into your pocket, the government has to get a portion of that. And it is the major income for the government. So that is, it forms almost 36% of the revenue. So the government intends to get 36% of that from the income tax. It intends to get the next from value-added tax. Value-added tax is the tax that is added once you add value to a product or a factor of production. So in this case, what I'm talking about is if you buy a t-shirt and you brand that t-shirt and you go sell a branded t-shirt, you have added value to that t-shirt. And once you add value to that t-shirt, the person who is going to purchase that t-shirt has to pay an element of tax on it, on the value that you've added to it. So you have to charge that person because the value you've added on that t-shirt, you've added on it in the country of Kenya. So you have to add value on that t-shirt and the government will charge VAT on that. So any value addition you do to a unit of production in Kenya, it attracts value-added tax and the government makes around 24%. And then we have excise duty. And then we go to the next item, we have import duty, which is around 5%. And then we have appropriations in aid. There's something called appropriations in aid in the revenue collection of the government. And that is basically the amount of money that ministries or government agencies charge for services. There are some specific services that the government charges you on, like e-citizen. When you're using e-citizen, registration of businesses and all that, there's an amount that they collect. So to the government, that is revenue, and it's normally called appropriations in aid. And finally, we have other taxes accumulated together. What I'm saying is that the Kenya Revenue Authority can give the government around 3.3 trillion, and then the government will have a difference of around 600 billion, which, as it is right now, they have to borrow. In another episode, we'll talk about how that figure has changed over time. Is the current regime increasing the amount of money they have to borrow from outside, or how have they adjusted this budget so that they can basically reduce the amount of money that we have to borrow from outside and from within? From an allocation perspective, that is how the Kenyan budget, in this case, the current regime's budget, looks like. I will not want to push this conversation further beyond here for now, but I'll come back to you with a conversation that will now start comparing this allocation of this budget allocation from the previous year and the previous regime. We see if there is any changes and what do those changes mean to going forward. The most important thing for us to understand today, as I come to the end of this session, is that it's important to understand the allocation of the budget. It gives you a very good story to understand what is happening in your country. And the one thing we can pick from this conversation right now, it's something that you guys already know, but I'll just repeat for those who haven't heard, is that 71% of our budget goes into recurrent expenditure and interest payments. We only have like 29% of money to spend. 29% of our budget is what is available to us to spend every year. 70% of that is not available. What does that mean? Are we doomed? Would you want to find yourself in such a scenario? And how many other countries are facing similar things? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Those are some of the questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we go forward. And therefore, we shall delve deeper on this channel to just have these kind of conversations. And remember, I am an educator. I educate, but I also allow for conversations because I also learn a lot from you guys. And if this kind of conversation makes sense to you and you think that you're going to learn a lot from these lessons or my lessons on this channel, Ask Dra, please feel free to subscribe and feel free to discuss these things on our channel. I'll be very glad to engage you. Let's build this army of smart people, and I will be glad to lead you as your captain. I'm so happy and glad to be back. For some while you might not see me on video, but the reggae never stops. Information has to be given, the lessons have to continue, and we shall keep it going for as long as we can. But I'll be back soon with my live videos because I'm creating my studio. I'm setting up my studio for future video shooting, which I hope I'll be done soon enough for us to pick it up from there. For now, it's been great. I am happy to be back, and I look forward to picking up this conversation from where we have just left it. How has the budget allocations changed compared to the previous years? And what do we think is the reason, or why will the current regime change the budget allocations? Why will they do that, and where do they intend to head to? For now, I'll say thank you very much for being a member, and thank you very much for joining this army. Bye bye.